Hi, this is Michael Leahy of the Irish Freedom Party. I'm talking to you today about the far right trope, the far right scare that I'm sure you can't have helped but notice in our newspapers and on our radio and televisions over the last week or 10 days. Certainly nothing new. Our left wing media have been complaining about the dangers of the far right for quite some time, but they seem to have ramped up to a new level of intimidation and idiocy against ordinary people by describing them as being far right. Not so long ago, they were describing people who prayed silently outside abortion clinics as being far right. And more recently, the young women who appear with their children in prams and buggies to complain about unvetted and potentially criminal so-called asylum seekers coming into our country and being planted into local communities. They call them as far right. And in the last week, of course, we've seen rural people of County Clare being described as far right. So it seems that if we keep going in this direction, there won't be too many people left in the country whom the Dublin elite will not consider to be far right. I'm looking at the newspapers this morning, and I have to say, even though I am terribly cynical about our journalist so-called profession, which no longer is a profession, I'm actually quite shocked at some of the headlines that I'm reading. The Irish Mail on Sunday, Gardaí, we need new anti-far right laws. For the Garda Síochána to call for laws specifically to deal with a political ideology that they disapprove of is a new low in Irish policing, certainly, and in Irish politics and administration generally. They say they need bespoke legislation. Bespoke. Presumably, this will only deal with people who are of conservative bent, who are concerned about such issues as immigration, and it will not be used to deal with other people. This is a quite extraordinary thing. Continuing with that article, existing legislation is letting us down, and they say, and this is quite absurd. Apparently, this is a Garda source. It's quoted as a source in this newspaper. They absurdly say it is only a matter of time before extremists kill somebody here if the threat is not dealt with quickly. In other words, give us resources, or if somebody dies in some strange context, we'll blame you for it. This is a typical tactic used by what Sinn Féin used to describe as securocrats to frighten government and to frighten people into believing there's a threat where none exists. They say the Prohibition and Incitement to Hatred Act is obsolete. I wouldn't agree. The Prohibition and Incitement to Hatred Act is very, very stringent and very severe. It's now been replaced by the appalling hate speech legislation, which is going to criminalize anybody and everybody who speaks openly about certain sensitive issues, such as immigration, for example. And they also say the Public Order Act is out of date. That needs to be toughened. The Public Order Act, when it was introduced, was described by most of the solicitors that I know practicing in County Clare as the South Africa Act, because it gave extraordinary powers to the Gardaí to force anybody to leave an area without necessarily having to give cause, just to form an opinion. It gave powers to the Gardaí to close down a legitimate protest if they felt there was a danger of violence. And of course, that kind of power is capable of being abused and misused. Many guards haven't misused it, but some of them unfortunately have. They say that there's an effort afoot to target immigrants. Well, there is an effort afoot to target the open doors immigration policy that this country has been operating for the past several years, including facilitating, aiding and abetting illegal immigrants, people who come to this country and claim to have lost their passports. If you believe that, you'd pretty much believe anything. They say that we, the far right, and the Irish Freedom Party is mentioned in the article, are targeting vulnerable people who believe in anti-state conspiracy theories. We are criticizing many of the actions of the state, and we're right to do so. Why you call them conspiracy theories, I don't know. I think we're kind of running out of conspiracies, and we're certainly running out of theories, because almost everything that we've been claiming over the past number of years has come true. They also say many of those attending anti-immigration protests were also involved in anti-vaccine demonstrations. So the suggestion now is if you're concerned about your health and you don't like the vaccine program, or you didn't like the lockdowns, then you must be part of the far right as well. They also suggest that agitators have been attempting to infiltrate the County Clare locals who formed a blockade outside McGowan House. I can assure you this is not true. I went there to congratulate them. I spoke to them at a very, very early stage of this and gave them a little bit of advice about the planning matters, which I'm somewhat expert in. But I would never, ever attempt to infiltrate or to manipulate a local group. I think I should point out at this stage that within Clare there's another migrant centre about to open up, which is quite shocking as well, and I'll tell you about that in a moment. In today's Sunday Times, they say Clare protest stokes far right globally, and they're complaining about people in other countries looking at what's happening in Clare and looking at the videos of it and being quite shocked by it. So they would presumably far prefer that what happens in Ireland is not broadcast abroad. Irish people and Clare people have a very good record of standing up to bullying and tyranny from the state. And that's what they're doing in McGowan House, and good luck to them, and I wish them every success. And people should be free to be able to watch that. But for some reason or other, the Sunday Times editorial, or not the editorial writer, but the front page writer, seems to think that the fact that people abroad are watching what's happening in County Clare is some kind of a threat. Now, it also says in this article that the Garda Síochána is now allocating additional surveillance resources to monitor those who support right-wing ideologies. Well, you don't have to be very extreme in Ireland to be considered right-wing. If you if you're concerned about homosexual pornography in primary schools, then you're considered to be right-wing. If you're concerned about the mass murder of thousands of our children in our abortion facilities every year, you're considered to be right-wing. If you advocate, as the Irish Freedom Party has done, for a humane and sensible immigration policy, then you are considered to be right-wing, and apparently in Garda Síochána are now ramping up their efforts to surveil us. Well, we do everything in the open. There's nothing to surveil here, I can assure you. The Irish Freedom Party are an open, registered political party. We have nothing to hide from anybody. We express our opinions openly. I mentioned about another facility about to be opened in Clare. It's just 5 minutes drive from where I live, so I'm a local. I was down there, participated in a very small demonstration with about 40 people at the demonstration yesterday, and it is quite extraordinary what they're doing. It's a single private house, literally in the middle of nowhere. I would say it's a 10-minute drive or thereabouts, or certainly an 8-minute drive from the little village of Corfin, which has a couple of shops in it, and it would be a quarter of an hour from Ennis, quarter of an hour from Ennis time, and then it's up in a hill, exposed in the middle of a somewhat bleak countryside. I hope that local people don't mind by saying that, but it is a somewhat exposed area. And it's a private house. There was a video done a few days ago, which many of you may have seen, showing a total of 44 beds that haven't been put into this facility. I was talking to some of the local people last night, and they tell me all this has happened during the night. These beds have been moved in, and apparently 2 new bathrooms have been installed in the middle of the night. Who's doing this? The chap who organised the demonstration was able to talk to the man who owns the house, and he showed him a video, a screenshot of an email from the address was at equality.gov.ie, so a government department, possibly the Department of Equality and Law Reform, coming in the middle of the night to significantly adjust a single private house so that it can be made available as a migrant centre for 44 people, with beds being stacked side by side, bunk beds being stacked side by side in an extraordinary fashion. Now, if that is the case, if that has been going on, that these people have been coming in the middle of the night, first of all, I should point out that they're severely breaching the planning laws. While the government did introduce an exemption for commercial buildings to be converted to asylum centres, they introduced no such exemption for private houses. So to change this from private house use to an immigrant centre is a serious breach of the planning laws. If a government agency has been doing that in the middle of the night, I can only conclude that they're conspiring, and yes, it is a conspiracy, to breach the laws of this land. And you really have to wonder, have these people lost or run themselves completely? It's bad enough for the guards to be politicising the whole judicial process without our state agencies trying to undermine the planning system. There's one septic tank dealing with this house. There's no adequate water supply. You have to walk for an hour to get to a shop. It is absolute madness to be talking about putting 44 young men into this facility. What we are watching as we see these far-right scare tactics being used by our state, sadly by and Garda Síochána, whom I've always had the greatest respect for, but their leadership and their intelligence service seems to have gone over the top on this one. What we're watching is the dismantling of our system of justice and the dismantling of our state. And we need to wake up to that fact. This is being done at the behest of state actors and state agencies, all to ensure that a massive number of immigrants will be brought into this country and that people will not be able to protest against it. Sadly, I think what we're witnessing over the last year, something over 80 to 100,000 people have been brought into this country, that may be just the beginning of a very lengthy process of plantation. We have experienced in Ireland of plantation before, and it looks as if we're going to have to go through the same thing again. I will be doing a specific video on the facility in County Clare. As I say, it's only 5 minutes drive from me. I will show you where they intend to put these 44 people. I intend writing to Clare County Council to ask them to investigate the matter. I think there's sufficient evidence of planning skullduggery going on, and I think there's sufficient evidence to seek the Clare County Council would use the planning process, the enforcement procedures under the Planning Acts to stop it from continuing. I intend doing that. But it is quite a shocking situation if government agencies are involved in this, and of course, with no consultation whatever with local people who are now outraged. People living very isolated and not very secure areas. There's often a difficulty when you're living in an isolated area. Your level of security is not good. And to bring in unvetted people who may be criminals, they may be, who knows what they are, being planted into an area without any facilities, it is understandable that they are extremely worried. This has been Michael Leahy of the Irish Freedom Party. Thank you for listening.